Welcome to Raising the Curve, a podcast designed to teach you everything that you need to know to be better with your money. Come and learn alongside me, Sophie Hallwright, a total beginner, from the finance expert, Victoria Harris.
So I've asked all of the questions you wish you could so that finance, investing and growing your wealth actually makes sense.
Yes, it's expert education, but that we promise will not be boring.
And in the wise words of Cher,
my mom said to me, you know, sweetheart, one day you should settle down and marry a rich man. And I said, Mom, I am a rich man.
Come and talk and learn and laugh with us, because together we really can raise the curve. This conversation is with Jordan Rondel, who is a New Zealander who's moved to LA and created the most amazing business called The Caker. So she started it in New Zealand when she was like 21. And it grew into this global brand where she was then making cakes for Miley Cyrus's birthday and other celebrities. And she just created something which just had the most incredible brand loyalty that you just don't often see. And particularly with a brand that's not like a person, you know, like, yes, she's a person, but the brand is cakes. But people just live and die by these cakes, by the cake boxes. And yeah, she's really amazing. And she's now living in LA. And we spoke all about her journey in business. She started when she was 21 and it was going for 14 years. At the end of last year, she decided to sell it and is now kind of rethinking what life looks like beyond the caker. But I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago, or maybe not even that long ago, there was this big moment where Chrissy Teigen launched a new product which was essentially copying the caker and what Jordan had created, and it was this big thing on social media. Anyway, we spoke about that, but we spoke about resilience, how to deal with competition when you're in business. There was just so many moments in this conversation where I felt really inspired and super proud of a New Zealand woman who has just created the most amazing business. So have a listen. It's a really cool chat. And if you would like to find out more about Jordan and what she's doing, we'll link her Instagram in the show notes because, yeah, she's just really cool. So here is The Caker. Jordan, I'm so excited to speak to you. I actually have followed The Caker and been a giant fan of your work from afar for a long time. I think that the creativity and I don't even know how to explain it. And this maybe is just going to sound like I'm shitting all over New Zealand, but I feel like there's not a lot of brands that come out of New Zealand where I look at them aesthetically, like when you sort of engage with it, it feels like a real international brand. And I think that what you did with The Caker was exactly that. And obviously you moved overseas and there was like a lot of influence, I guess, and also planning around that, you know, it seemed like from afar, you started The Caker and you always knew it was going to be so much bigger than baking in your kitchen. But yeah, I just wanted to say it's really cool to speak to you. And I've heard through, I can't even remember who, but a while ago, I feel like I came up with some random idea of doing like cake and crypto night or something. And I was like, oh my God, the cake would be great for this. And then I was speaking to someone in your team and they were like, oh, Jordan's actually like quite into investing. Like she's aware of it. She's interested in it. And I was like, oh, cool. So anyway, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
I would love to start by just kind of speaking about The Caker and where it started, which I'm sure you're probably sick of talking about, and I promise we're not going to stick on this for long. But for those who don't know much about The Caker or where it started to where it transitioned into being a global recognizable brand, was this something that you started and thought this is going to be a huge business, or was it a passion project that took off? Like, what was the grassroots story of the beginning of The Caker?
Oh, it's a great place to start. Okay, we're going back to 2010, so quite some time ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a good 15 years ago now.
That's a long time.
This is like, pre-Instagram, a lot of the stuff that we know builds amazing brands today or helps to. But my business was really sprung from a very true, authentic, kind of undying love for baking. And a lot of bakers who have successful businesses will say the same thing. It's an easy thing to fall in love with. For me, cakes represented so much more than just something really delicious or something beautiful to look at. They represented, something super important to people's lives, and were often the center point of these most important occasions in people's lives. And I think I was really kind of enamored by that. Like, it's what a cool vehicle for celebration,
It's also so true that we don't often celebrate success milestones outside of the traditional like wedding, birthday. So the fact that we have a wedding and a birthday to celebrate, it's like, thank goodness we celebrate something, because it's just a moment to stop and pause and be grateful and be around people you love. So I totally get that.
And throughout the course of my career as the caker, I learned that there are a ton of occasions that we can celebrate with cake. So I really fell in love with that whole concept. About how they were just so much more than something to eat. They were like actual experiences. So I started the brand out of, a real pure passion for baking, but it quite quickly evolved into something more because I realized that there was this emotional connection that I could form with people. And that meant something to me. And I also kind of quite quickly realized that I really love entrepreneurship and I love brand building. And I was like, okay, there's no stopping me from turning this into some kind of empire.
To think that at that age you had those thoughts, but also I think traditionally service industries or skills that require a lot of your time, a lot of people really struggle to productize or grow a business outside of that because for obvious reasons, you can only make so many cakes. So the fact that you realized that early is so cool. I wish that I'd had that way of thinking as a young woman. Like I just never thought about the idea of productizing or commoditizing on my skill sets as an asset to be able to build equity in a business. I just never, I don't know if it was that I wasn't surrounded by that as a kid or just didn't have the self-belief in my own ability to do that. But was there a moment in which that kind of became very obvious to you where you were like, oh wow, like this really could be something so much bigger than what I realize right now? Are there any moments that stick out to you?
Yeah. And just, just to go back to what you just said, like my dad is a businessman, but like built off a very creative business. He was a furniture designer who kind of like had his heyday in the 90s and is still quite well known in New Zealand. So I kind of grew up around a business mindset, but also like very much in the creative space. So maybe that's why that came quite naturally to me. I know he's the coolest. But yeah, I mean, look, probably the biggest pivotal moment that I recall being like, okay, this is the real thing, is when my sister joined me in the business. So she came on as a co-founder. Well, not really a co-founder. I'd already founded it, but she came on as a co-owner about 5 years in. And together in that first sort of 6 months together, we tripled revenue, we tripled the number of employees we had, and we tripled the size of the space that we were operating out of. So output also just tripled. And I was like, oh shit, like we can really build something here. And also it was just like so much more fun instantly as well, having my sister with me.
Yeah, it can be a pretty lonely journey starting a business. And I don't know why everyone says that. Like, I don't even know how to put it into words, because you can talk to people about what's happening, but it's just a completely different stress and all-encompassing feeling being in a business than having a job. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm not trying to preach Stephen Bartlett or any of those like entrepreneurial podcasts, but it there's something that comes with having a partner in crime within your business where it's like, oh, cool, we're in this together.
Absolutely.
So I totally understand that. Looking back, was there early decisions that set the tone for the brand's aesthetic and identity? Because you speak, and I guess what you're doing now after the Caker is very much helping with that brand building piece, which is so important in such a world that's saturated with brands and social accounts and this and that. When you look at 21-year-old Jordan, are you like, that was pretty clever? I like that I did that.
Well, I think I just kind of did what I liked doing, and one of those things was at the time was quite unique, was creating cakes that tasted even better than they looked. Like I cared more about taste and aesthetics, but I learned quite quickly that like when something tastes really good, it also just happens to look really good, in my opinion. I took a very authentic just focus and was like, if I put out what I love, hopefully other people will love it too. And they really did. And I think they could respect what I was doing because of that. It was like really, I was following my own taste and intuition to guide the brand. And it's what led to our commercial success in the end.
It almost sounds like such a cliche, but it's so true. You just have to do something that you like and the right people will find your brand. It's like, this is maybe a weird example, but if you think about how many yoga teachers there are in the world and you go to a yoga class and you're like, sometimes you actually just hate them. There's no the way they speak, the way they say the word breathe, you're like, nah, not for me. But then there's people who absolutely love that yoga teacher, and you just have to remember you're not ever going to be something that everyone likes, but leaning into that can actually be a really amazing way to find what your niche is as a business or as a brand, and for the people that are actually going to like it to find you.
Totally.
I'd love to know, as like you were a young female founder and also in the creative space, did you ever feel underestimated or like misunderstood, and particularly when it came to money or the financial side of the business?
I was thinking about this. I mean, I get asked this a lot, and I wish I had a more sort of like gender related answer, but I think maybe where more of the like sort of biases came from were less about gender and more about like sort of creativity versus business savviness. Like I think there's kind of this assumption that exists, like if you're a really creative person, you aren't necessarily commercially driven and like aren't able to make amazing brand deals and like aren't financially conscious. Like I feel like a lot of people don't think the two things go hand in hand.
It is so true.
Right?
And I think people think that about me. Like I've never really heard it put like that, but it's true. There's this inherent way that we almost discredit creativity as not being financially lucrative. And I guess it's because you look at how people are reflected in their remunerations, whether they're a doctor or a lawyer or in their finance where they're paid a lot. But if you're an amazing graphic designer, often the pay is less. Like it's almost like people subconsciously think of creativity as not as valuable or financially viable.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know if that has really anything to do with me being a woman, but it's something I certainly experienced. And I think that I like to think that I disproved that theory along the way. You can be creative, very creative, and also be able to pull out a sick brand deal and like make it really commercially viable.
100%. And I guess for anyone who has been or worked in or owned a small company knows there is, I can't even say the question without laughing because it's actually just so stressful sometimes financially. But for anyone who has never worked in a small business where there's really limited resources, there's always such a push and pull between like what you can spend to grow, what's actually feasible, the runway of how long a business can survive based on what you spend. What were some of the biggest financial challenges that you faced when scaling the Keika? Like were any of them surprising or different? What were some of those financial challenges that you came up against?
For a long time, like for the first maybe decade, there were no challenges that really like blew me super off course. It wasn't until we decided to expand to the States that the challenges really like hit hard. First of all, because we had decided to bootstrap rather than raise straight out of the gate, we were investing a lot in the US company in US dollars, but like, using the New Zealand company's profits. So all of a sudden the investment was kind of like worth half. We also really wanted to like launch here with a huge bang. So we invested more than we were used to ever investing in marketing and just exposure. So it was really like, just a bit of a shock how much money went out the door very quickly, very early. And then also during that exact time, COVID hit. So in the States, we were hit much sooner than in New Zealand. So we were like kind of battling like two different timelines of, the results of COVID on the brand. And it was both were really, really difficult, but to manage them at different times was also really a challenge.
Oh my God, you almost had like a double
double whammy.
Yeah, like so unpredictable as well, because what happened in New Zealand was so different to what happened in the States. You couldn't even look at it and be like, this is probably going to happen here. It's like, no, it was all so different the way it played out.
It was crazy.
Do you, when you think about the stuff that you invested in from a marketing or brand exposure perspective, like what did you find was actually helpful to break into a new market? Because the States is huge and so audacious as a tiny little New Zealand speck of the world to go and be like, nah, we're going to make it in LA and in America. Like that's wild. What were some of the things that you did spend on where you were like, that was a great return on investment?
Well, you're totally right. We went from being a pretty big fish in a small pond to being the tiniest little minnow in a huge, huge pond. So we kind of knew that we had to, speak the language, which is money. That is like the only language that people understand here, and invest in PR for the first time ever. Like I did everything in-house myself before this. So we scoped out an agency that we knew a few other brands had used, and it was really successful, and they were very expensive, but we were like, it's going to be worth it. And for a launch of a new brand with a good story and cool founders, like it did work. Like there was some pretty epic press that came out when we launched. We had an amazing Forbes write-up and an amazing Bon Appetit, which were both very kind of, story driven and like all about us as founders. It wasn't just like a sell, it wasn't just about the product and trying to sell anything. And it really paid off in the beginning. I quite quickly learned that like, unless you have something to constantly talk about to your audience, there's not much point in paying for PR.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because we're in the same position now. I mean, I wouldn't say we're a big fish in a small pond, but, some people know what the curve is in New Zealand. And then going over to the UK, there's such an enormous population there. And whilst there's not actually heaps of competition, it's not like saturated with people trying to talk about investing in money. It's very humbling to go to a new place and people are like, sorry, what? Sorry, who are you? You're like, oh, this is like 5 years ago.
Humbling is the word.
Oh, it's so humbling. One of the things I'd love to ask you about is like how your relationship with money changed, because you went through so many different business phases. You had the early days in New Zealand where probably, I imagine, most of the revenue coming in, like you could see it, you knew what was going on. It was like a lot more controlled. To then expanding to a new market where you're like, oh my God, this is going to be huge, to then selling an eventual exit, for people who might not know what that means, is essentially selling a business and hopefully having some kind of like exit payout. How have you noticed, I guess your personal and or business relationship with finances changed throughout those different stages?
Yeah, there were a ton of different stages. During kind of our most exponential growth period, we really focused a lot on top line revenue more than profit. We were just like, hey, let's just keep growing. And that was so much fun, like to not worry about how much things cost and to just kind of only worry about that top line was like the funnest time ever. But that can only go on so long. Like eventually you do need to get back to focusing on making a profit.
Did you have investment at that point? Like, was that why you were able to spend? Or were you just like, do you know what? We're going to put aside X amount of money for this growth to spend, so we're not going to think too much about it?
We never took any outside capital ever. We did have a low interest loan at one point, but it was kind of just like whatever we made, we could put back into the company. Eventually we did have to get back to focusing on profit. And it wasn't until we released our shelf product, which was the copycats, that we really had to like start looking at margins quite closely, because now all of a sudden we have a product that is going to be wholesale. So everyone along the way is going to take a little cut. And so margins became a really big focus later on.
The fact that you didn't take capital, you didn't have any investors, you grew and scaled actually quite quickly. I know for you, it probably felt like an entire lifetime, but that's amazing. And then to actually sell, like who did you sell to? And are you open about what the exit was, or are you able to give any details around how that played out?
I owned the business with my sister, as I said before, and she, before she joined me, was a lawyer, and she started having these thoughts about wanting to go back to law. This was kind of beginning of last year, I would say. So beginning of 2024. And I don't know, when you're most like the person you trust the most and love the most starts to have thoughts, you're kind of like, oh, I wonder how I feel about that for myself. And kind of got to thinking like, maybe this has been 15 years of my life and it's time to or 14 years at that point, maybe it's time to think about what else is out there. And so it really was both a very personal and strategic decision at the same time. And it took about 9 months to find someone, but we eventually did. And it was a New Zealander that we sold to, which is really cool because that's, that's where the keiki was born. And it's where a lot of the brand equity and loyalty still exists. So that totally made sense. And it's in really good hands. And I'm really, happy with how it all worked out.
Gosh, that's honestly so wild that you grew a brand for 14 years and then stepped away, because there's so many stats and data that speak to founders who sell and then plummet into like what the hell is my life purpose? What am I going to do with my time? Because it is quite addictive when you work on your own business. Like last night after dinner, I cooked dinner for my parents. I'm living at home at the moment. So chic. And I was like, do you know, I don't have any meetings tonight. This is the first night all week and the only night all week that I don't have meetings. I probably should just like relax and unwind. And then I just found myself back at my computer, like editing a little video and like doing a little bit of this. And I was like, gosh, I know it's not great. And I know that I need to have a better work-life balance. But for you, like having poured your heart and soul and all your time and money into a business to then sell it, what was the period post-sale? Were you just like, shit, yeah, celebrating on the beach in Mexico? Or was it like a weird transition for you?
It was super weird. Was very conscious about like giving myself a couple of months to just feel good about it and chill and relax. If I could have honestly done like an eat, pray, love moment and gone to Bali for however many months, I would have done that. But like I have a boyfriend. I have, my sister went straight to study for the bar, Californian bar. So like, who would I have even gone with? And so I kind of just like gave myself 2 months just to relax. And then I started to freak out in sort of like the very beginning of January, and like not really freak out, but just like really start to put pressure on myself to figure it out. I really in earnest started to like look at what it is that I want to do next. It has been really fun. Like it's a very different experience for me in this exploratory phase without much structure or a routine, but I'm trying my best to enjoy it. And I don't want to just jump into the first thing that comes along. And there have been things that came along very soon in the process that I'm glad I didn't just like jump into because they were wrong. I'm really being conscious about like what it is I want to do next is like the next big thing for me.
Well, it's also, if you think about like how loyal you were to the caker and to that business, it was a 14-year journey. It's not as though you're going to just quickly jump into something else. I mean, it could be 20 years down the track.
Totally. That's how I am. I'm just like an all-in person.
Oh, I'm so excited to be telling you about BePure. This is a brand that I've been using since I've been home in New Zealand, but actually have loved forever. The reason that I'm talking about BePure today is because ahead of New Zealand winter is a really good time to be investing in your health. There's 3 particular BePure products that are part of an Immune Essentials pack. The first one, which I've been taking for a couple of months now, is the Zinc Restore. I didn't realize what a massive powerhouse mineral this is for all-round health. It supports your gut, immunity, hormone balance, mood, energy. It's been very much needed for me, so this has been part of my daily routine. The Super Boost C, this is high potency, fast-acting immune support. It's got over 3 grams of vitamin C per serve. It's kind of like inhaling 39 oranges. And then the third one for your winter toolkit is the Vitamin D Restore. It's also very good apparently for PCOS, side note. But this is a really important one for anyone that experiences seasonal depression. So I will be taking this back to London with me. It's kind of like sunshine in a bottle. If you would like to get 20% off these 3 products for the Immune Essentials pack, you can do that. There's a link in the podcast show notes. One thing that I would say is just so brilliant about this is that you can pay month by month and they come and are delivered, so you don't have to go and invest in 3 months worth of products up front. You can pay month by month, you can factor that into your budget, but also it's low admin. You're not having to go and order them every month, which for someone like me who forgets everything, that is ideal. So thank you so much to BePure for making my body and mind feel so much healthier. Yeah, and for any details about these products, you can find them in the podcast show notes. Do you think there's any parts of the cake? I know that you do a lot of interviews and you speak really openly about the brand and the business, but are there any parts or pieces of the story that you think people still misunderstand or have misunderstood from afar?
Well, it's hard to know what people didn't understand, but if I can make an assumption, it would be that, building a brand that from the outside appears very like cult and cool kind of means that the founder or founders like have it all figured out and have it all planned and they're super, onto it at all times. But like, I often found myself building the plane while I was flying it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I kind of learned on the job a lot of the time. That made me quite good at taking risks, which led to growth. And I'm proud of that,
What do you think is a good place for, because I think there's this perception that women aren't good at taking risk or that, we don't like risk as much as men. What is like exposure therapy in a business sense that you could do to test that out? Because I don't know if I'm good at taking risk or not, but I would love to be able to, at one point, if I step away from the curve, be able to look back and say, I was really good at taking risks and I got better at that. What does that look like, or what did it look like for you? Would it be having an idea on something, thinking like this could totally flop, but trying anyway? Like, are there some small examples you could give to that where maybe initially that felt quite scary and risky, but then over time, those things just were constantly happening?
Well, I can speak to a very big risk that we took, but it's one that was very calculated and like it did take a lot of time to execute. So, it felt safe in the end, but like I look back and I was like, wow, we were brave. Like that was a huge thing to do. And that's expanding the company to America, like just without even skipping to Australia first or anything. We just went straight for the big guns, and it was super, just the hardest thing we've ever done, but the best because of how much we learned along the way. And that was a huge risk, and I don't take any of it back.
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like I remember seeing like you made Miley Cyrus's cake once, and I just thought, shit, yeah, that's a New Zealand woman killing it internationally, like it's just hard to understand because I think New Zealand's so segmented from the rest of the world that small stuff like celebrities taking an interest in a brand is just like, wow, because the magnitude and the way that can influence the future of a brand is pretty enormous.
Totally.
Were there any like big other pinch me moments like that where you were like, we need to take a second here and be like, wow, this is pretty cool?
Yeah, and I totally agree. Just on your point, like I feel like what I love so much about being a New Zealand founded business and having expanded overseas and having success overseas, it's so celebrated in New Zealand. Like the trickle down effect is real, and I love that. Like we're so proud of our brands that make it overseas. But I remember really early on, like in the first sort of maybe 2 months of moving here. This was back before COVID really hit. So it was like still the focus was on creating a bakery so that we could kind of like build the brand that way and then introduce the cake kits a little later on when there was already like brand loyalty and an understanding of what the hell the cake was about. We'd rented this like commissary kitchen and we were taking orders and slowly building up like a clientele. And one of our very first orders we got was through a friend, and it was for Flea from the Red Hot Chilli Peppers wedding.
Whoa. Which
was cool. And I sat down with, his wife-to-be, and we did a tasting, and it was like so sweet. And then the wedding day came, cakes were great. We decided to like deliver them ourselves rather than use a service.
Oh, I'd be doing that too, definitely.
Yeah, you're like, I want to go see, I think we even like rented like a Mustang to go do the delivery.
It's so fun.
Went to go set them up, and they were like, oh, why don't you just stay for the wedding? And we were like, sure. And so I just have this very clear memory of like, setting up the cakes alongside this florist who I was like obsessed with and had been for years. He was just happened to be there. And then behind me was Lauryn Hill performing
Oh my God.
a live set, and Flea's like coming up and like eating the cake. And it was just like, whoa, this is so surreal. And like, we've made it, that's how it felt quite early on.
Wow, that's so amazing. And also, I do think when you're doing something big and bold, like moving overseas, you do need those small wins. Not that that's a small win, that's enormous, but you kind of need those wins along the way to be like, oh, tick, okay, cool. And I think, that happened to Vic and I with the Curve in London when we tried a little stint, not last year, but the year before, and we were invited to speak. I always say the wrong one. It was either Oxford or Cambridge, I can't remember. And I just remember thinking, this is wild, but it's just sometimes you just, because it's hard, it's such a slog, and the whole time you're doubting if this is a good idea or not. Will you make it? What percentage of businesses do actually do well overseas? It's not a lot. So to have those wins is like, okay, cool. You can like re-steady yourself and then kind of like keep climbing,
Yeah, you don't take much time to celebrate those wins. You're like straight on to the next thing. But
can we talk about this, and you can also totally shut this down because I don't know if there's like NDAs around it or you're not allowed to speak about it, but because we're talking about celebrities, I remember the whole like Chrissy Teigen saga from afar and just being like infuriated on your behalf. And I felt like the whole of New Zealand was just like, what's going on here? And you can 100% be like, can we not talk about this? But I guess the reason that I brought it up is there's, you've poured all this time and energy into building up a business and putting all of this IP into something. When or if, as a small business, you come up against something that feels wrong, but maybe you're sharing so much of your skills and your expertise publicly. Yeah, like what were some of the learnings from that? Did you look back on it and think, oh yeah, we dealt with that really well? Or was that a really difficult time?
What made that even more crazy was that Chrissy and her team at Cravings like approached me to work on a collab with them.
Oh.
She was like, I love what you're doing. It's so cool. Like we should do something together. And I was like, absolutely, let's work on something. So we spent the next 6 months like working on a collaboration cake kit with.
Holy shit, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And so it wasn't like copying from afar. It was like
integrated and like
hands-on copying.
Whoa.
And so right before it was about to launch and go to market, they essentially tried to call it off after we'd already like invested a ton of time and money and IP and everything into it. And the reason being was that they were about to release their own line of luxury cake kits.
Surely is that not illegal? Like, I mean, I don't know anything about law, but your sister being a lawyer, was there not like some kind of, I don't know, IP?
It's pretty hard to protect. Well, first of all, recipes are impossible to protect. And then I think with food packaging or any kind of visuals with food, it's like it's as vulnerable as any other category.
Well, yeah, I guess also because on your cake tins you have like what ingredients are in there. So it's like, it's not as though it's like the secret hidden thing that no one can get access to. You're kind of, the way that you actually have to approach your product is by being transparent. So it leaves you quite, I guess, like vulnerable to copying.
It can be, yeah. But what I also learned in that process, like while it stung and I did end up speaking out about it, after a lot of thought, I was like, should I address this publicly or not? The amount of support that we got was so just beautiful and like really helped me through that time.
It honestly gives me goosebumps just hearing you say that because I can't even imagine it. And to think that there's like this army of cake lovers who are just so passionate and like supportive of you to come up and say like, no, this is shit. Would have just felt like you've got your little army behind you, It
really was. It was it ended up being like one of the better experiences in my whole career with the caker. But through that, I also learned like having competition in a category that didn't sort of traditionally have a lot of brands like yours. So I really think that we kind of like reinvented a category. Like cake mixes have always existed, right? But for forever that I know of, there weren't luxury ones that made like actually very good cakes with clean ingredients, like cost what ours cost. And so we were kind of the first to do that. And that's a really heavy lift for brands. Like the cost of educating our customer around why they should spend as much as $25 on a cake mix, and that it's not this like sort of like pantry staple. It's like it's an experience. The lifestyle item. It's a gift. Is a really heavy lift. Was a really heavy lift for us to do. So for someone else to come along and kind of be like, oh, we're going to do this too. It actually can like help relieve some of that burden off your shoulders to kind of carve the path out for your customers. And so I can look at competition as like not a bad thing. It all worked out just fine, but it was a great story in the end.
I mean, I feel like it was one of those iconic things that everyone will be like, oh, that time that Chrissy Teigen tried to take down the caker. Like
still to this day. Yeah.
And just in terms of your like personal approach with investing and like where you put your money, and particularly now that you're in a position where you're not earning a regular income, how has your investments evolved over the last kind of 15 years? Where do you like investing? What kind of assets do you like to put your money in? Is it property? Is it stocks? Is it crypto? Is it small businesses?
I've actually dabbled in all three of the ones you just said: property, stocks, and crypto. And I'm still in the crypto and the stocks to a degree, I'm very like lean with my investments at the moment because the markets are just too volatile. But I have bought properties before and since sold those and kind of got out scratch. Like I didn't make anything off properties. I actually kind of don't think property is a very good investment.
It's so interesting.
Anymore, depending on a lot of different factors, but that's just been my experience. I think your money is very tied up in property, and I think it can be put to better use. That's kind of where I am with that thinking. I don't know. I'm quite fond of having it in the bank account at the moment, to be honest with you. For now.
When you say that you think there are better ways to make money than property, have you had any success in other things? Like whether it be particular funds or stocks or art or anything like that, where that's given you the confidence to move away from property and into something else?
I experienced some quite good returns on a fund that I was invested in, an Australian fund that it was quite a small one that only had like 20 companies in their portfolio. And I experienced some quite good returns from that.
Was it like a private equity or yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I've only just started learning about private equity and I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds really cool because you get access to businesses like even just cool New Zealand ones like AS Colour, that's not a public company, but that you can invest in them through private equity. I was like, it was totally blew my mind. I was at a concert and this random guy was telling me about private equity and I was like, hold on a second.
Yeah, no, it was quite cool. But every month they would send through like their roundup newsletter thing. And they would say like, returns were great this month, but like you can't expect this to keep going on. And I guess eventually that became true, and it all plateaued out. So I was like, I'm just going to get out and have my money safe and put it somewhere when I know it's right.
Yeah. Also, you might want to invest in another business. You never know
That's
what
exactly
the next
right.
little while will lead to. And I guess for you, if you need liquidity and the idea of the markets are all over the show right now, I totally understand the idea of like, I just feel safer having it in the bank for a period of time.
Too much volatility.
Yeah, fair. It's quite interesting to hear someone that's like obviously schooled up and knows about investing and money and finances, but you're opting to have it in the bank because that just is what feels right for you. Like if this was 3 years ago and we were talking to someone who didn't know anything about investing, I'd be like, no, you need, inflation, blah, blah, blah. But like, then you look at people like Warren Buffett who have so much in cash right now and it's like, maybe it's clever.
I'll pick a time when everything is at its absolute lowest and then put it back in. Maybe we'll see how things go.
Cool. And I'd just love to finish with one final question, which is totally irrelevant from anything money related.
Okay.
If you could do all of this again, if you could do the caker again with the same ingredients, would you have baked the same business?
Look, going forward, I won't replicate the same business, but I'll put it that way. I will take everything I learned from it and apply it. But it was a great business. We built a ton of customer loyalty through building this intense, like emotional connection with our brand, which is hard to do, but it became quite clunky having the fresh cakes and then the cake kits as two quite separate lanes. And so they were quite hard to market separately. And I think whatever I do next will be like a very lean, clean killing machine, like very simple.
Lean, clean killing machine. Said like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Love it.
But just, I think simplicity is underestimated when it comes to business. Like just take something simple and run with it.
Such a good point. I've heard so many people who have exited their first business successfully say the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Simplicity, and also like not necessarily trying to be cool. Like you don't have to be cool. Actually, What is it? What's that saying? It's like sell to the masses, eat with the classes. I think I fucked that up, but
something like that. Sounds about right.
It's the idea of like you don't have to be this cool niche business to have a successful business. Actually, if you go sometimes for scale and ease, it can be more profitable and successful long term.
Totally. Pick a market that seems a little bit underserved and like find a gap. And that's probably what I'll do next.
Cool. And if anyone's interested in working with you, are you doing like creative consulting or any kind of freelance work?
Yes.
Okay, let's give that a plug because I think there'll probably be a lot of people listening to this that have ideas or small businesses. So what does that look like?
So that's a little unstructured. It kind of depends on everyone's need. But if you flick me an email at jordan@jordanrondel.com, we can figure out what works for you. And I would love to give back in some way. That's what brings me the most joy right now.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for speaking to, I was going to say us. I keep saying, oh, we did an interview. It's like, no, I. Thank you for speaking to me. And yeah, I can't wait to watch from afar and see what you do next. I feel the like same pride I feel for someone like Lord for the caker.
Love
you
Lord.
know, like any international brand, whether it's like an artist or a business or anything. I think what you said earlier is so true. There's such like a passionate, like in New Zealand, there's this weird tall poppy syndrome. But as soon as someone kind of like flees offshore, everyone's like, go get it.
I'd love to know what everyone thought of this podcast.
Same, actually. It's really cool when people leave comments underneath the podcast episode because I must say when people send us DMs on Instagram, I sometimes forget what it's about or like what they're talking about.
And like imagine if we were doing shit episode after shit episode for over 200 episodes and we had no idea.
I mean, I don't know if we would have got to 200 episodes if they'd all been shit.
It's like someone not telling you what food in your teeth. Like, please, can you help us out here? Tell us what you like, what you don't like.
Also, we look hot. You know? Like, we want to know if
Compliment
it's a good episode.
us. Yeah.
So if you're listening, wherever you're listening, and you have a thought on something we've spoken about or a question or comment, please do leave it on whatever platform you're listening on. It also really helps us from an algorithm perspective, like for more people to find the podcast.
Yes, which we want to educate more and more women about the fun and beauty that is finance and investing.
I don't know if anyone's ever said fun and beauty talking about finance and investing, but I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Quickly, The Curve was created to empower and educate you about investing, but we are not financial advisors.
Our platform exists for educational purposes only, and it doesn't provide personalized investing advice for your individual needs and should not be relied upon to make an investment or financial decision.
And always remember to do your own research before making any investment or financial decision.
We're here for any knowledge and support you need, but the final call is always yours.
And thanks for being here.
You got this.
Yeah, we know you got this.